Hello and welcome to another part of Learning to Play Heroes of Newerth. My name is Feast on Thrones, and today we're doing the sister part of the Courier video, and we're going to talk about item builds. And for this video I've picked Predator, who is probably my favourite strength hero, in that he gets very powerful late game, and he's a good example of someone that can be played multiple ways and has multiple guides, different kind of builds at the beginning. Now you can play him as a jungler, though he can struggle at level 1 and 2 if there are a couple of hard creep camps. Or he can play as a lane, and he's really effective against Devourer in the middle lane, for example, when you play a normal matchup. But I'm going to talk a little bit about item builds and what you should be looking for. The main thing to remember is that there are preferred item builds, but each player has their own preferred way of building their hero and own way of playing it. So though there are perhaps like wrong ways to play it, if you're comfortable in a way of playing a hero and you know that you're getting sensible items, then there really is no wrong way to play it, unless of course you're getting Staff of the Master for Predator, because that's ridiculous, and you don't need that. So that would be a wrong item. But usually, if you stick to these guides, there's no wrong build. It's just different people's opinions. And we've got to remember is that Heroes of Newerth is a game that's played worldwide, and so people have got different backgrounds, and so they're bound to have different opinions, and you're never going to agree. But what I urge you to do is, instead of just going, no, that's not how you play the character, or no, I like playing the character like this, at least listen to what they have to say, because there are experienced players. But what you have to remember is that if you're comfortable playing the hero the way that you like it, then just say, look at my stats with this hero, my recent matches, so long as you've done well, of course. I know how to play this hero with this item build, and then prove it. If someone is trying to rage on you and spoil your good time, because there are people like that in the community, then prove that you're a good player and you know how to use the character that you have built. So what I would suggest to start off with is to look at one of the guides, probably top 3 or 4. The pink star is usually okay, but I prefer going for one of these 100%. These 100% guides, but there's so many. You can often go, which one do I go for? I have no idea. And I have my own builds that I build for this hero, just like anyone else does. I usually go for, I think it's this one. Yeah, it's this one here. Except that I don't get the 2 fortified braces at the beginning. I go for Alchemist's Bones first, and then I go for Demonic first. Well, I go for Warp Cleft after I get Brutalizer. So my build is Alchemist's Bones after Boots, then I get Brutalizer, then Demonic, but getting Warp Cleft first. And if I'm doing well and I don't need the extra survivability, or my team doesn't, then I might just get Warp Cleft and go straight for Shield Breaker or even Savage Mace, depending on how well I'm doing. And that's the build I usually go for, because it's a really powerful build on Predator, because he can attack fast anyway when he's got the Warp Cleft, and the Alchemist's Bones, and the extra farm that you get from the Alchemist's Bones is invaluable, and really when you get Shrunken Head later on, you just become this death machine that no one can touch you. But that's not in any of these guides. This guide here has the Sanitarius, and I've tried this build. It's quite good. Lots of players go for Frostburn, getting this item first, Ice Brand, and you know that works for them, and then fine, they do a good job. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you, because that takes a different skill set. It's a different emphasis on different kind of play. That's more tanky, when the build I for is pure damage and and able to survive stuns, and also to stun their carry so that they can't cast any spells, which is a useful tool and technique and strategy. But other people have different ways of playing, so you've got to remember that there really is no kind of wrong way to play a character. As long as you're confident in a sensible build from the guide, then go for it. And if you're kind of tweaking on a guide like I do, then be confident in your ability to do that, and then you should be fine. Now, while I'm just going to go farm the forest, I don't really have to think about playing. I'm obviously not playing against anyone. When you've picked a guide, you don't always have to follow it right to the end. Like this guide here doesn't have any mention of Shrunken Head, and I'm going to talk a little bit about reactionary items now. And Shrunken Head is really good for defending yourself against stunners. So if they have a team like Witch Slayer, Pebbles, Valkyrie, maybe even Tempest for that kind of AoE crowd control, then get Shrunken as long as you're the carry. But just because they have a lot of stunners doesn't mean right at the beginning of the game you should go, oh, I should buy Shrunken Head, because that's not a good tactic, especially if you're going a support character. Then there's no need for you to get Shrunken, because you should be at the back shooting them or using your spells, and you shouldn't really be in the fray getting stunned. Other items is a Void Talisman. You can find it under Relics, and that's the only place you can find it. And that gives you physical immunity for a few seconds. And I've won games where I was a squishy caster and a really fed predator came out, jumped on me, I used that, and he would chase me down, not realising he couldn't do any damage to me. And when he was away from his team, beat down on him, and then the rest of his team fell. And just one item can win you the game, and it's really that simple. But if you're, as I said earlier, if you're not the carry, then you don't always have to get those kind of items. So there are some other reactionary items even, and a good one is Culdre's Sheepstick, for example. And this is kind of late game. If I can find it, there we go. Support late game items. It's very costly, but it's really good for, you saw last game, Chipper or someone like TB, as you can lock down the opponent's carry for a few seconds, meaning that you can dispatch him really quickly, because they essentially turned into a box. Well, they are turned into a box even, so they can't do anything. And so that's useful, but you will have to have a lot of farm to be able to afford that in the first place. So you won't usually get that unless you're doing extremely well. But that's a good item for someone who, like a late game carry like Predator or Warbeast or Malakin, because if you can shut them down for 3.5 seconds, 3.5 seconds is, well, for those of you who play StarCraft 2, 3.5 seconds in game in the competition is like, well, it's not a huge amount of time, but it's a decent amount of time. And in Hon, in a team fight, 3.5 seconds is an age, really. So much can happen in 3.5 seconds. And if you're being taken out of that fight and all your kind of stats, your armor and your auras have been shut down, then, you know, it's such a good item to have. But again, I wouldn't get Culdre's Sheepstick on Predator, because that's a ludicrous idea. There's no way that I need Culdre's Sheepstick. Oh, so we just messed the courier up. No, go home. We're going to buy you another item as well. Okay. So after a long pause, that kind of, I don't know, dramatic effect, I was trying to remember something to think, but you should always bear in mind what hero you're playing, because if you're playing a hero that has no need for a Shrunken Head, then don't go and try for it right away. Even if you're the carry and they've got lots of stunners, if you're jumping in, beating down on them so quickly that they can't get their stuns off, or they stun you, but it's not really a big deal because they're not doing any like sufficient damage when you're stunned. If you're Parasite, for example, and you're going and ganking solo players that are hanging around by themselves, then even if it's Witch Slayer and he stuns you and minimises you, then there's no need, because you can chase him down, and with Parasite's ability you'll just kill him. But that, it's a different hero. But I think the principle is there that you just got to think, and like I said earlier, there's no wrong or right build. You just got to find one that you're comfortable with. I'm comfortable with this one. Like usually at this stage of the game, I always want to have I'd be soloing one of the lanes in a 5 versus 5, and I would have worked with my lane partner, and I would have a few kills and a few assists, and I probably would already have my Alchemist Bones and probably the first stage of Brutalizer, if not the second, depending how well I've done in the farming department even. Because it's very important. Well, I'll do another video on being a jungler anyway, but it's very important as a jungler that you definitely go and gank, and because the amount of XP and gold especially that you get is invaluable early start in the game, and just the way that you can deny a whole lane their farm is really, really useful. But as I was saying about items, you need to think. Just because they have a lot of stunners doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go straight away and buy anti-stun. You just need to be able to read the game, and that takes time. It takes practice. There's like anything. You're not going to become a grandmaster in like instantaneously. It's going to take time for you to develop your skills and get better, and be able to read the game, because that's probably the most challenging part. It's not how well you can get off your skills or level or farm. It's reading the game, knowing when to get a certain item, knowing when to run away from a lane, because even though you have no wards, you see that two of their team is missing and someone's called miss in the middle lane, or even better, they haven't called miss in the middle lane, but you know they're going to come for you because you've been ganking. That's the kind of thing that takes practice, and as you move up the ranks and down, which we hope doesn't happen too often, but undoubtedly does, the different player rankings you play against, the different players are better or worse, and so in 1400, there aren't always often miss calls shouted out, so you've got to be savvy of that. Well, higher up in the 1500, they're often always called for the benefit of the team. And so you kind of got to vary your tactics and vary how you read the game. But I think that's really all that I have to say about item builds. It's quite tricky, and you're not going to get it overnight, so don't be disheartened if people say you're building the wrong item. And as I said earlier, it's all to do with one's own bias and opinions. Now, you were wondering why I left that creep and then went back to him when I had my Alchemist Bones. The Vagabond bosses give the most amount of gold, and with the Alchemist Bones you can get 300, which you can't get from any other creep. Even the Catmen, even though they're harder, you get about 290. So it's always worth to use your Alchemist Bones on Vagabond Lord, or whatever his name is. But I think that concludes the video today. I know it's been going on for quite a while, 13-14 minutes, and some of it may have been repetitive, so I apologise for that in advance. But I think I got the basics, and like I said, there's no wrong or right build. You're just going to be confident, and if you say, I know how to play this build, then prove that you can play that build. And then that's the best way to stop people thinking low of you. And if you don't do your job properly in that build, then go, actually, well, maybe that person was right. Okay, he may have been so and so, but maybe he had a point. So be flexible, because that's sometimes what the Hong community doesn't have. It's kind of people who meet halfway. It's very all or nothing, and that's why people get angry, and that's why there are lots of arguments and swearing. And try and get past that, and like try and be a better man. I know it's difficult, and as you progress, you will get irritated when people don't call, missing from their lanes, and then suddenly 5 people descend on you, and just, you know, it is frustrating. But just ask them nicely and say, well, guys, can you try and be more aware of calling SS? And usually, if they're decent people, then they won't have a problem with that. So thank you very much for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave comments. I will be bringing out another video soon, perhaps on tips about jungling. I might even do tips just about laning, with some footage that I already have from a game I've played, or maybe where to ward and the ward spots and who should be warding, things like that. So yeah, please leave me a message, and subscribe to my channel. If you want to add me and play with me in game, I'm always happy to do that. I've got a bit of free time, so I'm usually on in the evenings, the GMT time, so that's Greenwich Mean Time. It's the centre of the world, time-wise, and I always accept invitations, and I can play with you and talk on voice chat, things like that. So thank you very much for watching.